let's just break it down in really simple terms, really broad historical terms. The great industrial powers of the 18th and 19th century were Europe and England, or Europe and Great Britain, right? And when they were the great powers, the industrial powers, they have absolutely every right to then be the centers of the pricing regime and the pricing mechanisms for all the great industrial inputs. If they're the great industrial powers, that's what it should naturally gravitate there, right? But if the Japanese are still at the zero bound, there's still plenty of avenue to get cheap dollars through borrowing cheap and ultra cheap yen to keep running the grift on the short end of our yield curve.
Right.
And the yen carry trade, and that loophole's been closed off. Force a capitulation by Maduro in Venezuela, where the silver and gold and copper concentrates that have been taken off the market, never making it to the supply chain, the refining supply chain in Switzerland, to go to LBMA to give them the future inventory they need to be able to underwrite all their stupid, paper games. That goes away. That, at the same time, it's a pincer move against China, because China was the one off-taking all that silver, gold, and copper concentrate and going directly to the mining companies and taking that all off the market and sending it back, I think, smuggled in Venezuelan oil tankers. Russia produces an unbelievable amount of uranium and tungsten, nickel, gold, right, silver, like all of it, and oil. Yes. So what we have to do now, I think copper's next. Obviously, copper's in process, but what's the friggin' final boss of all this? Taking away pricing control of the strategic commodity, the most important strategic commodity, away from Europe. Oil. Brent crude.
Yep.
Brent crude.
Tom Luongo, go Goats and Guns. Good. Happy New Year to you, my friend. How are you?
Happy New Year. Yeah, absolutely. That's been my joke for the last couple of days, and only some people are getting it. Like, Quality Leering Center, Happy New Year. Yes, Andy, it's good to talk to you.
I got
it. It's been fun. It's hilarious. I don't know. The world has to be fun, and if we're not having fun doing this, then we're doing it wrong, right? This is so yeah, it was a good Christmas. I got to spend it with my daughter back here in Florida. I go back to Tennessee tomorrow. Been down here for about 15 days or so. It's been great. Been cold actually, and let's what are we going to talk about? Because it's like there's nothing going on. So I mean,
yeah, right. There's nothing going on.
Let's just tag it and move on.
I always really look forward to our talks. But number two, there's a lot going on. Really, what's been on my mind is we're going to call it the Great Reset, but it's completely changed really since November 24. And we can say it's changed for Trump, or you don't have to, but I would say, yeah, it has, because we were going in one direction, if you would. I would say a reset that to me was very scary. But a reset regardless of what we're happening. Now I would say it still is scary, but it's exciting. It's a good time really to be an investor in gold, amongst other things, but it's exciting. Talk to me about what that's looking like in 26.
So the way I've been describing it recently is that this is going to be both the lamest and most dangerous attempted civil war we've ever seen, and because they're clearly setting up for something, but I don't think they're actually going to be able to pull anything off. So they're going to do so with some of the lamest stuff we've ever seen. But the reset is happening, but that reset is not what they were originally hoping for, which was to create the you will eat bugs and Minority Report with more Germans and all of my old talking points. But I can actually retire most of that stuff, because clearly Davos is not. They're not the ones pushing the pace. They were the ones pushing the pace for many, many years. But if you go back and I think back now and all the stuff that I've written and all the stuff that I've talked about over the years, I wrote an article in 2021 called "Have We Reached Peak Davos?" And it was about right about the time that they were trying to scare us all to death with Omicron variant of COVID, and it kind of failed. Right? No one was willing to like go along with the, oh, you're going to scare us with Omicron now? Okay. Like, and everybody was just like, no, I'm sorry, we're not playing that game. And to me, the amount of capital that they put into that narrative, and it failed. They couldn't bring in new vaccine mandates. They couldn't lock the people down again. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do that. I think that really was the moment where Trump, and think about it at this point. At that point, Trump's like on his way to becoming a felon, and all the things that we know happen after that. Like, and there was all these other things happening in 2021. I think it was 2021. It was 2022. I can't quite remember. It's well, like, dude, I'm getting old. So like, but you all know what I'm talking about. And you think about it, it's all happening at the same time that now Powell has started the stealth retightening of the euro dollar system. With the 5 basis points that changed the world, the raising the reverse repo payout rate, which drained all that money into the reverse repo facility through 2021. Then there was the fight over his reconfirmations, and then he started raising interest rates and really breaking down the leverage within the euro dollar system. And that was all kind of a financial rearguard action while Trump was out of power to stop while the Biden junta were shoveling trillions of dollars out the back door, and we found out where all that money went. Quality Leering Center and the Somali Mafia up in Minnesota. We also see the same thing like in Maine now, and they're uncovering it in Ohio and Washington. And so, but all of that is way downstream. This stuff was happening then, and it was causing the blowout and the affordability crisis for healthcare and housing and cars and this and that. Because look, supply chains were broken thanks to COVID, so there weren't houses being built. There was none of this stuff happening, and yet they were importing 20 million people into the country and using tax and subsidizing all of it with taxpayer money to shut Americans out of their own country, like to literally price them out of their own country.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that they were then going to run the table, kill Trump, install Kamala Harris or Nikki Haley as president, and then continue the looting of the country, and then break us apart and destroy us, and all of that, and then use what's left of the military power of the United States to back NATO's play, to kick Russia out of Ukraine, break the Russians, and win the future. Right? This was the apotheosis of the 300 years worth of British desire to break the Russians. Right? The whole Halford Mackinder, geopolitical pivot of history thing. Now we're standing here a year after Trump, a year and a couple of months after Trump is elected, and just about a year to the day, 3 weeks away from the first anniversary of his inauguration, and we're staring at a completely different world. 2025 was just it might wind up being the most consequential year we ever had in our since, like, I don't know, 1971, 1968, I don't know, 1985 at the Plaza Court. Pick a day, pick a year. 2025 as a year was immense because there was an attempt at a violent summer of violence that fizzled. There was a massive breakout in gold and silver. So now we're talking about the great reset of the potential for the great reset of the entire monetary system that is not controlled by City of London, and their ability to price all of the strategic assets in the world that flow through either the LBMA or the LME, as well as Trump upsetting the world by the United States defending itself by putting on, economically speaking, by putting reciprocal tariffs on everybody. And that's fundamentally just changed everything. And so, yeah, you're right to say there's a great reset happening, but it's Trump's great reset. So now, of course, what we've seen at the same time that's all happening from a political and just really from a political perspective, what we're seeing is an organized the color revolution in the United States isn't over. It's just metastasizing into different aspects. So you've got Mamdani in New York, Mamdani in New York. I should say Mandami because I like mispronouncing his name because he's a fucking idiot.
I call him Mandami.
Yeah, liquidating, trying to do everything imaginable to start liquidating New York City. This morning, we're doing this on the day after New Year's. We get the note that the mayor of San Francisco now just approved $5 million reparations payments
Yep.
to us, by a city that's running $1 billion a year budget deficit. Like, where are you going to get that money from? It's not coming from federal government anymore. American taxpayers aren't paying for it. You're going to loot. Who are you going to loot? You're going to loot all the high net worth individuals that are fleeing California.
All the tech companies. Oh, the irony.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, the irony. And so, by the way, millennials, this is by the way, this is the actual definition of irony, not what you people think it is. No offense to the millennials in the audience, but it's an old joke between myself and Dexter White. So, with all of that in mind, where do we begin 2026, right? We begin 2026 by realizing that the LBMA has lost control of the pricing of gold. It's losing, or it's really has already lost control of the pricing of silver, right? And then, so what's next? Well, I think the last time you and I talked, I kept pointing everybody at copper. Copper ended the year at 567 or 570 a pound, depending on which futures contract you look at. After an entire year's worth of battle for $5. Like, if you go look at a quarterly chart of copper, like, they kept bombing copper into the end of the quarter, trying to stop the $5, the close of $5 a pound. So now here we are. It's 567, and I'm not sure what the price is this morning, but doesn't matter. We got the yearly close around 560 a pound, plus or minus 10 cents. Huge thing. And then you've got Trump, forcing Maduro to finally, knuckle under to all the pressure in Venezuela. And I just got off a 2-hour call, or hour and 45-minute call with Tommy Kerrigan, Ian Burlingame, and my friend Halsey English, talking about all of these things and what all that stuff means from that perspective and the geopolitics of that. And we got into some of the finance and whatnot as well. But when that one posts, probably by the time we're done with this talk, recording this talk, that one will be out in the zeitgeist, and I do heartily recommend people listen to that one as well, because it's a very nuanced discussion about what Venezuela actually means. We don't
send me that link. I'd love.
Yeah, I will. I will, and I think it's really important because it's good synergy between myself, Halsey, and EM on this, and because when you see what we're talking about in that one, everything else that I'm talking about, we talk about in terms of just raw positioning in the gold and silver markets, will make so much more sense. For those of you who are really gold and silver savvy, and you're following people like myself and Vince Lanci and Chris Marcus over at Arcadia Economics, and that brain trust, that end of the brain trust, you realize, oh yeah, this is all one big story. So what I want you to think about in terms of the Great Reset now is the following. Let's just break it down in really simple terms, really broad historical terms. The great industrial powers of the 18th and 19th century were Europe and England, or Europe and Great Britain, right? And when they were the great powers, the industrial powers, they have absolutely every right to then be the centers of the pricing regime and the pricing mechanisms for all the great industrial inputs. If they're the great industrial powers, that's what it should naturally gravitate there, right? But we don't live in the 19th century anymore. Mm-hmm. We live in the 21st century, and the great industrial powers of the world are the United States. All rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated by British press, and China. So the United States and China. And if you watch what's happening in the gold and silver markets today, and why this is being pushed this way, is that China and the United States are saying this is not right. And we're not living with a 19th or 18th or 19th century pricing model and pricing supply chain model of all the major industrial inputs in the 21st century. We're the 21st century industrial powers. We should be pricing these assets.
That's exactly what's going on. Yep.
Okay. So let's start. So if that's your strategic thinking, and you're the Trump administration, and you've got Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary, then that idea validates the analysis that in all of 2025, Besant was running an operation to drain the LBMA of all of its gold. We printed dollars and we bought gold with them and we transported it all to New York. Not tough, folks. And then we did that for the first half of the year. And then when the European Union finally knuckled under to the tariffs and everything else and signed a trade deal, we stopped debasing the dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but now the cat's out of the bag that the world is changing. The pricing regime for gold is changing. So gold keeps rallying, and then silver takes over in the second half of the year because now China shifts in, and the United States and China are running a tag team match on London 2 months, for 2 or 3 months. The United States is off taking the silver, and then it's China's turn. We go back and forth. And to be honest with you, you can almost chart that with every time the Trump administration and the Chinese talk at the high level. Either Trump meets with Xi or Besant meets with his counterpart in China. It always seems to be right around that time, and then all of a sudden the flows shift, right?
Right.
So, and again, I don't have receipts directly on this, but I know that Vince Lanci does. He's published. He's talked about all this stuff over at VBL's Gold Fix, right? So my good friend Vince always gets a shout out whenever I can, because Vince is doing that forensic work because he's uniquely qualified to do that work and knows exactly where to look for it. Whereas I would be, it would take me a month to get up to speed to learn this stuff. I outsource that part of my brain to Vince. Vince does the work. He tells me, I tell you. We push it. We push these ideas around the world. So the main point here is that if you look at 2025, first it was gold, then it was silver. Now it's going to be copper, right? And by extension, it's also going to be aluminum and tin and lead and nickel and cobalt and tungsten and this one and that one and all of them, right? Now, what also happened in the second half of the year?
What didn't happen in the second?
Well, okay, no. From a financial markets perspective, yeah, what didn't happen? What didn't happen the minute the Fed under Powell didn't cut rates for most of the year?
Right. They started.
Trump forced a trade deal onto the European Union at the end of July.
Yeah.
Right? By September, by the time we get to the September Fed meeting, Powell's changed the Fed's, gotten rid of the Fed's 2% inflation mandate, moved back to the dual mandate with an emphasis on labor, right? On improving the labor markets, which is right in line with Trump's, American system stuff that my friends over at Promethean Action like to talk about. And so put that into your wheelhouse. The tariffs are working. The revenue's coming in. The real deficit is actually falling. And then we get the first rate cut from Powell in September, right? Yeah, Trump bitches about that he's late behind the curve, but that's all kayfabe. That doesn't matter. But the most important thing is this. What started in December of 2023, or 2022, sorry, the end of old Japan's monetary policy. So now let's
talk about that.
Now let's square the circle. Square the circle about all the other things that are happening. So what's been my argument about the shift from LIBOR to SOFR? That the Federal Reserve now has control over the short end of the yield curve and U.S. monetary policy, right?
Yep.
We never really had that when LIBOR was the dead end, the cost of capital for global dollars, because whenever the Fed tried to assert that power, LIBOR would force them to interrupt the rate hike cycle, right?
Right.
And the liquidation of malinvestment, as a fig leaf to my formerly Austrian brethren. Now, that's one aspect of it. What's the next thing we need to get control of? What has been Trump's raison d'etre from the American economy perspective? Getting Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship,
Yeah.
back onto the markets, because what's Fannie and Freddie's real role in the market? It's to control the long end of the yield curve,
Yes.
which we haven't had control of since they stole Fannie and Freddie from us in 2008.
Got it.
So from 2008 until 2022, the United States was not in control of its own yield curve. City of London was. The Eurodollar system was.
I'm getting chills. Okay.
Now, so think of it that way. So first, SOFR.
Yep.
Now you're trying to get, and so if you watch everything that's happened in Congress over the course of the year, I kept saying to myself, why are they acting this way? Why is there so much FUD about Fannie and Freddie relisting and the IPO and all this stuff on FinTwit? Why am I watching this? Why am I watching good, normal people losing their fucking minds left and right over Fannie and Freddie? I didn't even get it. As I'm watching this go through the entire year, I'm like, I don't understand. And then they shut the government down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, over nothing. I'm like, oh, no, they're trying to stop Trump from relisting Fannie and Freddie before the end of the year. Because, so they're burning assets left and right at every turn to stop the Fannie and Freddie relist and return to the market where they can then, have control over the long end of our yield curve. Trump goes to Asia, ends the war between Cambodia and Thailand, gets Malaysia involved to be the broker on the deal, then speaks to Xi. All of a sudden, it's not the United States that's, mutzing with the silver price anymore. China takes back over. And then he goes to Japan. And did you watch that state visit? Because I did.
I did, but I want you to tell me. Go ahead.
That did not look like, the conqueror coming to deal with his benighted subjects. That looked like a whole bunch of very grateful people celebrating a liberator.
Yeah.
Because his discussions with Sanai Takaishi, the new, Trump-like or Maloney-like sovereigntist in charge of Japan. I was watching Japan closely. The coalition talks between Takaishi and the rest of the other minor parties. And now I have to get into a little bit into Japanese politics to prove this point. But the reality is this: the LDP has been basically the Americans or British creation to keep Japan under control since World War II. We created the LDP. We control the factions within it. There's the neocon, there's the classic kind of British aligned neocon factions, and there's other factions. So Takaishi represented the sovereigntist wing of the LDP, the Liberal Democrats. They had been in coalition after they lost, full control of the country a few years ago. They had to then be in a coalition government with Komeito. Well, Komeito, apparently, last I checked, a lot of people helped me with this, have deep ties back to the transhumanist Davos aligned Chinese oligarchs. Now let's bring in Richard Werner and Princes of the Yen and all of that stuff and the yen carry trade and everything else.
Please.
Takaishi puts Komeito to the side and takes the smaller, I can't remember the name of the party now, I forgive me, but it basically comes down to the Japanese kill all the Muslims party. And they form a coalition. So now you have a full-on sovereigntist Japanese government for the first time since World War II ended. Japan has been slowly rebuilding its military. I heard rumors of, and I haven't seen anything since then, but I've heard rumors of two things hit the market multiple.
I heard the same thing. I've heard the same thing. Go ahead.
That Trump is that the Japanese now want to finally seriously open up peace talks with the Russians to end World War II. Yes. Over the Kuril Islands, finally signed a peace treaty. And then second, that Trump is if he hasn't already, has put on the table that he will dissolve the governing council over Japan, that the Japanese government is not even in control of anything. The legislature can pass laws, but it has to go through the governing council that the Allies set up over Japan. And if we don't agree to this, to what they're doing, we can effectively veto it. That's a very British thing, by the way. Most people don't even know about it. I didn't know about it until I heard about it. And I'm like, I don't know that that's been taken out yet, but I know that I'd say by virtue of the fact that it made it into the zeitgeist at all, and for people to talk about it, means that it's part of the conversation of how does Trump finally give Japan its liberation papers. Well, even if he hasn't yet, what he has done is he told Scott Bessent to go and chat with his with Kazuo Ueda, the head of the BOJ, at the IMF conference in October, saying you need to normalize monetary policy. You have to deal with inflation expectations. You've got to deal with this. What I'm saying here is this all wraps up in that. So when you saw in December, Powell cut by 25 basis points and Japan raised by 25 basis points, who's the only major central bank raising interest rates? Japan. We still have a yen carry trade, but that yen carry trade is going away bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And the people, and so what does the yen carry trade do? Going all the way back to what I just said about SOFR helped us get control of the long short end of the yield curve. But if the Japanese are still at the zero bound, there's still plenty of avenue to get cheap dollars through borrowing cheap and ultra cheap yen to keep running the grift on the short end of our yield curve.
Right.
And the yen carry trade, and that loophole's been closed off. Force a capitulation by Maduro in Venezuela, where the silver and gold and copper concentrates that have been taken off the market, never making it to the supply chain, the refining supply chain in Switzerland, to go to LBMA to give them the inventory, future inventory they need to be able to underwrite all their stupid, paper games. That goes away. That at the same time, it's a pincer move against China, because China was the one off taking all that silver, gold, and copper concentrate and going directly to the mining companies and taking that all off the market and sending it back, I think, smuggled in Venezuelan oil tankers. That's my speculation.
Okay. Go on.
Does it now?
I got a bunch of questions. I got a bunch of questions, but go on.
So you just said it's the Great Reset. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, it is.
Good.
Because if the yen carry trade is gone and Trump can finally get Congress to allow to, look, he doesn't need Congress to uplist Fannie and Freddie. He can get them back on the New York Stock Exchange anytime he wants. He can do it tomorrow, right? And that sort of Damocles is sitting over an awful lot of people. Okay? So what you've been watching in the trade on Fannie and Freddie and Bitcoin, by the way, has been bombing the price of using one, why did we see for 5 months old whale wallets in Bitcoin, cold wallets, 10 years old, 8 years old, coming out of the woodwork and dumping shit tons of Bitcoin on the market and taking it down, right? Into the 80s, and then and someone's capping the price.
Yeah.
Now I'm watching Bitcoin this morning and it's trying to break above 90,000 for the first time. And in weeks, right? So were they taking Bitcoin and then using it to bomb Fannie and Freddie? Because it doesn't take a lot of money to bomb Fannie and Freddie. And every time it gets above 11, every time Fannie gets above 1150, it only takes a couple of $1 million to bob it back down into the down to the tens. It's not hard because it's a thin market. There's no market there.
Yeah.
So you've got the banks are desperately, who are sitting on all of the a lot of the shares and a lot of the junior preferreds and senior preferreds, sitting on all this shit, desperately trying to get the Trump administration to give them a better uplist price than they want. They want to be paid for their years, and I'm sorry, but they bought all that shit at 80 cents. Fuck off. We don't have to convert any of that stuff because none of that stuff is, almost none of it's convertible to common, by the way. It's only some of the junior preferreds are actually convertible to common. None of the senior preferreds are. So they can just be paid off as 8% bonds in perpetuity.
Right.
Nothing. All right. the money is irrelevant. But getting Fannie and Freddie back into the market and getting their corporate structures professionalized to the point where they can actually come back into the market to do the work, because they've been run by mouth breathing friggin' apparatchiks. No offense to the guys running Fannie and Freddie, but you're not the best people weren't working at those institutions. As a matter of fact, the best people were never going to work at those institutions, because the goal was to keep them dysfunctional for as long as possible, because this all ties into that desperate need to keep the American middle class credit starved.
Yeah.
As well as giving the foreign holders of the marginal foreign holders of our U.S. debt, and in this case, that would be the fucking Bank of England, who between it and its subsidiaries control well more than $2 trillion worth of our debt, that they have openly threatened to use against us if we don't help them take down Russia. They floated that son of a bitchin' thing in after Trump came back from Japan as well. And then Ueda comes out at the December meeting and raises 25 basis points again. What I expect for 2026 is a normalization between American and Japanese debt, that by the end of the year, they're trading within 25, 50 basis points of each other. That we're currently at 375, and they're at 75 basis points. I think the next Fed chair comes in, cuts rates down to 2, but at the same time, Ueda is going to stop, what's the word I'm looking for? Making baby steps towards normalization. He's going to start accelerating the pace, because the long end of the Japanese yield curve has already sold off to the point where now Japanese 30 years are potentially worth buying, because they're trading over 3%. Right. 10 years are trading over 2%. Now all of a sudden we're talking about, real money. We're talking about real returns. And the minute now that I think about it, this just popped into my head. What happens when the Japanese 10-year flips to German 10-year?
Money flows to Japan.
Exactly. and if I'm Scott Besson, I don't even care if they sell off the long end of our yield curve in order to threaten us with anything, because in order to maintain the bond spreads between European debt and American debt, which 90% of the fucking Eurodollar market is tied to, they're going to allow the German 10-year to rise. So who cares if the U.S. 10-year goes from 4.15 or 4.19 to 4.5 in Q1? Who gives a shit? You know what that does to the German 10-year? It sends it to 3.5.
Right.
And okay, but who wants to buy German debt with a failing German economy and all of that? So all you're doing is actually forcing, all you're doing is forcing those sales at lower prices.
Right. Okay.
And that then gives the room for the Japanese to continue to do what they're doing and unwind all of the short-term, borrow short, lend long carry trades, and just watch them bit by bit by bit go away. Notice how there was no Black Monday after the last Japanese rate hike. The first 2 times they did it was a big deal.
Yeah.
They unwound. So it was August 5th, 2024, Black Monday, when they raised up the zero bound, and then we watched equity markets around the world tank, right?
Yeah.
Because so the Japanese carry trade had gotten so esoteric that they were now buying cheap yen to pump stocks.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. Okay.
During the tariff tantrum, we actually watched them bomb the treasury market, and everybody was buying back their Japanese debt. So there was a massive unwind of a part of the carry trade during the tariff tantrum in April.
Right.
We haven't, and then it's been a steady grind since then. But every day, when I see a concentration of bullshit, right? When I see a concentration of, oh my God, Japan has anybody looked at the Japanese 30-year? Like, when I see that on FinTwit, I'm like, okay, so they're lighting their hair on fire. That's nice. What does it mean? Japan. Like, what does it mean? Maybe it's not the Japanese that are in trouble. It's the people who borrowed all that Japanese debt in order to get access to dollars that they can't get anymore, because they have to fund all of their have to fund. They're funding the oil trade this way. They're funding
Right.
how they're buying energy and this and that and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not like this is the limit of my knowledge, folks. This is my limit of my understanding of these markets. So if I start like going off the rails here and I start saying shit that doesn't make any sense to you, it's because now I'm vamping as I try to learn the next thing in the line. But when I look at it all from the big strategic picture, what do I see? I see the end of the Japanese carry trade. I see Japanese liberation walking in lockstep with American liberation from a financial perspective.
Okay, so I got tons of notes here. So this, I want you to answer the question, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I want you to answer the question anyways.
Sure.
And this is for the people that perhaps don't know. The end of the yen carry trade, why is that? You just mentioned why it's so important, but bring it down a little bit more for me. Why is that so important? And I was one of those people that were shocked that the US equities didn't tank after that because that was the carry trade.
I don't know. Well, maybe it's because a lot of it has been unwound, or maybe it's because nobody's actually been borrowing Japanese yen to buy U.S. equities, and the people who did buy them the first time weren't American investors in the first place, but were shit. But they all had the distinct odor of limey or frog.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, because then they control the financial media space. I said, I remember going on with Mel K back in July, and I walked into the house on fire that is Melody, and she's like, Tom, I just like realized that financial fake news is the worst kind of fake news, and I'm like, oh, you're absolutely right, Melody. Of course they are. Of course it is. And love Mel to death. She's a lovely person, and she's so freaking smart, and that I think is what people really have to understand. The whole Bloomberg, BBC, Sky News, Daily Mail, Financial Times, that's a mafia, folks. They control the financial press. They control the way we perceive markets. And what Trump did in 2025 was flip all that on his head and just say, these people are all swimming naked without any, they're just swimming naked out there and the tide's going out.
Right.
And so the yen carry trade was the secondary means by which the short end of our yield curve could be manipulated. Okay,
right there.
So you had to get rid of that.
There.
So that was the I thought I had made that point, but if I missed it,
you did. But that's understandable what you just said.
Right. So now this has to be done in order for us to have control of the short end of the curve, and then the uplist to Fannie and Freddie, and potentially getting them out of conservatorship and professionalizing them, gives us control of the long end of the curve. And at the same time, you're creating pincer moves on London between. This is the only thing I think the United States and China agree about. Okay, I'm not trying to paint the Chinese as good guys here, but on this it matters. And same thing for the Russians and the Americans as far as the pricing of things like tungsten and nickel and all the things that Russia produces an unbelievable amounts of uranium and tungsten, nickel, gold, silver, like all of it, and oil. Yes. So what we have to do now, I think copper's next. Obviously, copper's in process, but what's the freaking final boss of all this? Taking away pricing control of the strategic commodity, the most important strategic commodity away from Europe, oil, Brent crude.
Yep.
Brent crude.
Couldn't agree more. And I want you to talk again about, there's two things here. There's two very profound things that you just said. It's the whole Fannie and Freddie and the long end of the curve, because then that relates to housing.
Yes, it relates back to
affordable housing,
and again, the illegal immigration thing is also really important because you've got to get rid of the fraud. You got to get rid of these people who have all put a tremendous marginal pricing demand on the marginal house, the marginal insurance contracting, the marginal car sale, the marginal food, bundle of food, all of it was all designed to burden the illegal immigration plus the subsidies through the back door of all these NGOs and all of these government grant programs and all this crap that we're now, quality Leering Center and all of that shit, right? When you put all of that together and you realize just how big the fraud is, you realize you take any of that pressure off, and the law of diminishing marginal utility takes over, supply and demand takes over, and any halfway reasonably trained, economist in, marginal demand understands, oh, look, we're going to destroy if what we found out was that the price of housing is really inelastic relative to marginal demand, right?
Yep. Right.
Meaning it's just going to go fucking vertical.
Right.
So I saw something this morning, and I again pointed out in the previous show I did that there was, like, I think it's someplace I think it was Austin, Texas. It might have been Dallas, or might have been some area of Texas, where the average rental price has, since we cut off the illegal flow and are deporting people, at the average apartment cost in this particular area of Texas has gone from like $1,900 a month down to 12, and it's still falling. So it's back down to pre-2021 prices. So there's your proof of your pudding right there.
Right there.
Right. And it's this, like, talking about the yen carry trade, SOFR, LIBOR, all the things I've talked about. If you look at the way the central banks have responded, and the arc and the timing of how and when how much and when everybody else in the G7 cut, other than Japan, because Japan's the Japan's the thing everybody's fighting over. But you look at how the Bank of England, how the ECB, how the Swiss National Bank, how the Bank of Canada, how they cut rates and by how much versus what Powell did. They were all mostly through their cutting cycle before Powell cut from 4.5 to now 3.7, started cutting in September. That whole 1 year period or 9-month period from the last rate cut in December of 2024 to September of 2025, you watched the Bank of England cut 3 times. You watched the ECB cut 4 times. You watched them all cut. Trump complained about it, but that was because they needed to stimulate credit growth in order to try and get dollars, because Powell was starving the world of dollars. So they were cutting in order to debase their, in order to, print euros to buy dollars to do, like that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the Fed was the Treasury Department was pumping the dollars that we were printing, quote unquote, and or spending from the fiscal side of things. We were using that to buy gold and bring it into the vaults of GLD and the COMEX, and distribute it through that network. So that money those dollars weren't actually flowing. They were being sterilized back into gold, Bitcoin, other things.
That's why we had the rising gold and so on. Okay. So the next thing that so we talked about the yen, we talked about Fannie and Freddie and the long end of the curve and housing prices. You made something 20 minutes ago that was also very profound. And again, this is speculative, but I think you're right. For the life of me, it just didn't make sense, the whole Venezuela Maduro thing. And it does now. It's starting to make more sense. And again, this is speculative. Because it didn't make sense that it was an oil because it's heavy crude, right? What makes sense is that they were shipping over commodities on the black market.
I mean, that's one.
That's one idea.
I'm.
But work Venezuela out for me.
Right.
What is that about?
The important thing here, Andy, is I'm also remembering that this is a gold and silver podcast. So you guys want to hear that tie-in. I think it's a minor tie-in to the whole thing. I mean, it's not minor. I think the biggest tie-in is that we have to stop the flow of cash around the world to, what Ian Burlingame likes to call the devil's legions, to Hezbollah and Hamas and
that was going
ISIS and that was all going through Venezuela. You shut off the drug trade. You shut off all that cash. Right. You shut off the oil that Cuba was using, because Cuba basically runs on Venezuelan oil. So now you're cutting off, you're basically embargoing Cuba. So you're kicking the Russians out of Cuba. You're kicking the Chinese out of Central and South America. Like, this is Monroe Doctrine stuff. This is now geopolitical stuff. And as a nice little, to have, we also get to get control of the Western Hemisphere precious metals trade as well, and the strategic metals trade. Remember, silver's been
Yes.
added to the strategic metals list.
Yep.
So now it's national security.
Yep. And that's
And
all South America.
here's the thing about Maduro. And I think we should probably leave it here. And I'll do this one, and I'll leave people to think about this stuff, because I think I've already like reframed way too many things for people today. And again, we talk about this at length, and that is the episode of Tommy Kerrigan's podcast. I think that everybody should watch, which is that I don't see Maduro as the bad guy. I just see him as a puppet of a foundation of organized crime and extra territorial influence underneath him, and he's the guy that we're all supposed to hate. He sits at the top. Trump makes an issue of him, but if Trump wanted Maduro gone,
He'd be gone.
Maduro would be gone. He never wanted Maduro gone. What he wanted was Maduro free from that layer. Now, you'll notice during the entire thing, Davos and the City of London were setting up the counter trade of, hey, we know Trump's going to go after Venezuela, so we're going to create our new version. We're going to create the female Juan Guaido as the person that we want to put in charge, because Trump's going to go for regime change and get rid of Maduro. So we want to put Maria Machado. We gave her the Nobel Peace Prize, for fuck's sake. Like, this is what these people do. And she was there on the ground because they were going to do a regime change operation. Remember, this is all CIA, MI6, the Mossad, Chinese triads, like the Chinese government, like Russia. Everybody's in there. City of London, France, everybody's in there. Like, and it all ties back into why did Besant give Millet in Argentina $40 billion swap line, U.S. dollar swap line. It was in order for him to put Argentina, which is a very important, piece of the puzzle, and to isolate fucking Lula in Brazil. Now that I think about it, is clearly WEF. Anybody who still thinks that BRICS is anything other than an artificial creation, artificial conglomeration of Russia, China, and 3 WAF nations, like, what are you kidding me? It's not real. It's not real. India is the swing state, but Brazil and South Africa, like, really? Like, these are for all intents and purposes, these are WEF shitholes.
Right.
So for Venezuela, what's really important is that the goal is to free Maduro from that understructure and to stop the CIA from trying to do the meet the new boss, same as the old boss scenario, thinking that Trump didn't understand this. And Maduro would keep playing the game for as long as because look, Maduro is going to resist Trump for as long as he doesn't think Trump has the upper hand.
Right.
Okay. The minute Trump has the upper hand, Maduro's going to flip.
Yeah.
And he did this morning. He knuckled under this morning.
Right.
Trump just won Venezuela, and all he had to do was bomb one port.
Right. It's genius.
And blow up some speedboats and seize a couple of tankers. Piracy on the high seas, the evil American empire. No. Shut the fuck up, lefties.
Yeah, now we got access, or I should say, now it's free. We'll have access, to all the critical.
Moreover, like everything else, it protects the Gulf of America, because now the strategic move by Davos is to take the blue state governors and send them into revolt. And that controls all the port access on the left coast and the Northeast and the Great Lakes. But we still have the Mississippi River, and we still have the Gulf of America, and we still have Florida.
Yep. Florida, Texas, Louisiana. And
you got it.
Yeah.
And that little strip of Alabama.
A little strip of Alabama.
But nothing's there. So other than Biloxi. Honestly,
Mobile's there.
Oh, Mobile, yeah. Okay. Fine. Whatever.
Fascinating.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I'm looking at the game board, folks. And you can't watch any one part of it without watching the whole thing.
Right.
Because once you start like watching one part of it, then you say, oh, it looks like that. And then, but what you're looking for is the through line, if there's a through line. And there are multiple through lines here, folks. I'm highlighting the London angle on it because I know that that's what Trump is trying to break. Because if he can break London and he can break the EU, here's another one for you this morning. I'll give that in a second. But if he can do those things, then he is setting up the moment where he can take Congress back from the obstructionists and force them onto his side. Because
Right.
that's what exposing the Somali mafia is all about. It's getting people so fucking outraged at all of the graft and all of all of it, every bit of it, the brazenness of it all, that, okay, we're sending in ICE, not enough. The Supreme Court just says you got to use the military. And at this point, 80% of America, or within 2 weeks, I expect 80% of America will be more than happy for Donald Trump to drop the military into Minneapolis and start a cavalcade of C-130s, grabbing these people, sticking them in the back of a C-130, flying them to Mogadishu, kicking them out the back, doing a touch and go, kicking them out the back as the C-130s is a touch and go, throw them out on the ground, touch and go, get out of there, and just do that over and over and over again. And then when you're done with Minneapolis, you go to fucking Maine or Washington or wherever, and you just keep doing it.
Yep.
Nobody can do airlift logistics like the United States. And I, for one, would be happy to watch this happen. I'd even be happy to pay for a pay-per-view of, it all happening. Like, just give me C-130 cam or Somali cam, right? Like, you know what I mean? And I'd be happy as a pig of shit on this stuff. So, but when that happens, there will not be any pearl clutching out of Congress. Why? If you do it now, before we've picked people for the primaries, Elon Musk, Eric Trump, and JD Vance are in charge of picking the primary challengers for everybody. They're the ones putting the money together and the organization together of what they're going to, who they're going to try and primary.
Yeah.
Not Susie Wiles. That's what that was all about.
Yep.
And Susie Wiles has her old I'm not saying that she's evil or anything else, but she has her way of doing things. And that's to schmooze the old GOP donor base and keep those people and keep Trump, quote unquote, in line. So Trump has to play both of them against each other, both factions against each other, which he's perfectly willing to do, mind you. And if I'm wrong about that with Susie Wiles, we'll find out when he fires her in 2 to 3 weeks. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. If
she took her shot at the king and missed, she'll be escorted out the back door. So, it sounds like 5D chess. It sounds like trust the plan. No, that's your collapsitarian speaking. That's your black pill speaking. This shit's real. This is the way the world actually works. Okay. And, if you can continue to indulge that. And if you need to, that's fine. But that's between you and your therapist. That's not between, us and reality, because this is reality. This is what's happening. And this is the framework. If you look at the world this way, it makes so much more sense than whatever you're being told in other aspects, in other areas of the media, just because they, talk sonorously and, have credentials behind them and everything else. Like, I can do math, folks, just like anybody else. I can read the game board. And I'm just a dude sitting in my back porch in rural North Florida with a $3 Maduro cigar, reading the tea leaves.
Well, and then we'll end on that. But it just, not only does it make sense, I've had you on, I don't know, for 18 months now, and I'm going to say, I don't know when you've been wrong, but I'm sure you have, but I don't know when you've been wrong, but you've been mostly right. And I say that, but I don't know when you've been wrong. And this is not an egotistical thing or stroking your ego either. It's just working it out in that framework that you just presented where it makes sense. Because if you just think of just the conflict with Venezuela, it didn't make sense. So where's the genius in this? And I think you're presenting.
And I didn't understand it when he first started either, Andy. And now I just, but I stuck with the basic premise of the model, and then kept going through the iterating the model, talking to people who have specific expertise in areas that I don't have. I've talked to my friend Blaine Holt about this. I've talked to Ian Burlingame. I've talked to other people who have an understanding of the way you fight intelligence services, the way you move military men around, what cover for statuses, what I don't know any of this stuff. And so, this is not my area of expertise. So I get to learn those things and then integrate them into what I see. And if that other stuff matches, then we come together and we synthesize something new. And I go, oh, I get to level up. And if it doesn't make sense, I reject it. I move on. I look for other things. I'm no,
Right.
this is not rocket science, folks. This
Right.
is just basic everyday application. If you've got a good model, your model will be more predictive. And it will also have to improve as you learn new things.
Right.
Like, so I've been thinking about this whole Japanese yen carry trade thing since the day Kuroda stepped down as the head of the BOJ.
Hmm.
And then when his handpicked um, assistant, who's been at the BOJ forever, in a country where seniority and saving face rules, and that guy stepped aside for quote unquote the good of Japan, I said, no, everything's changing. I don't know what it means, but I
Hmm.
know it's changing.
Hmm.
And then that set me in the mode to go, I need to focus on Japan, level up on Japan, learn about Japan. I'm like subscribed to a couple of really good, you know, Substacks about Japan so that I can get up to date on this stuff. And conversations, for example, I've had with Ira Harris, his son, Tobias, runs Understanding Japan Substack. Brilliant Substack.
Hmm.
Brilliant if you want to understand Japanese politics, because
Right.
Tobias is a badass. And whether he doesn't have the same worldview I have as far as what all this stuff means, but he has a fundamental understanding of Japanese politics and the Japanese economy that I don't have. So there's lots of good information there. So I absolutely recommend Tobias Harris's Substack, Understanding Japan. It's not expensive; it's like $70 a year, and I consider it, the $70 plus the tax write off as minus the tax write off as some of the best money I spend every year. And I
Yep.
may only read an article from him once a month or once every 6 weeks.
Hmm.
But something will be in there that will be a nugget that says, that's what's important.
That's what's going on. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Well, Tom, where can people read more about? And I am a subscriber to your Patreon, but give us your Patreon. Where can people find you and read more about you?
Sure. You can sign up at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns. You can follow us for free. I post most of my media um, appearances there for free because they're public appearances. So, and there's probably, that community is about 8,000 strong, half of which are free, just followers, and we have about 39. We're closing in on 4,000 paid subscribers. You can get the newsletter, and in addition to my twice weekly private market reports, which are basically a mix of what I just did here, plus the events of the day and my technical analysis of the important markets and what it means in terms of what the story is every Wednesday and every Sunday. I also do stuff whenever I can. And then we put out the monthly newsletter, which is a kind of it's kind of the standard retail investment style newsletter with a portfolio strategy and everything else. I can tell you, Andy, you know, like when I go back over and I run it as if it was a fund, like, oh my God, is our return ridiculous? It's been a good year. I can tell
Yeah.
you that we had a good year and a couple of really great a couple of great picks that worked out really well. And I don't tend to pimp that stuff very much. That's not my gig. If you like what you hear, then you're just going to hear more of it on a regular basis. So it'll make sense. Then all of this will come with more receipts and all of that. And of course, my partner Dexter White does a great job of synthesizing everything he's seeing into one brilliant article every month for the newsletter, and it's a good time,
Yeah.
and it leaves us free to interface with the world.
Yeah. Well, I will link to it in the show notes. I am a paid subscriber and very happy. Very grateful to you, Tom, for getting to know you over the last 18 months, 2 years. You're one of the most popular guests I have on the show. So keep on doing what you're doing. And yeah, looking forward to 26 with you. And
Mm.
boy, is it going to be exciting, for lack of a better word. It's going to be very
It,
exciting.
it's going to be interesting and it's going to be fun. And what I would just recommend everybody do is every once in a while take a step back and it's you elected Trump to do a job.
Hmm.
He's the general you got. There's no profit in undermining him by getting cold feet or wetting your bed. If you need to someone to hold your hand, therapists are about $150 an hour.
Right. My wife is 225. So she's
Oh, okay. Well, wow. She must be. Mine was cheap. He was only 135. It was great. So he's a good man too. So
all right, my friend. We'll see you soon. I appreciate all your time.
mhm. Have a great New Year, everyone, and we'll do this again. I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. Of course.
Absolutely. Take care, buddy.
Take care.